On her first day of internship at one of the top media companies, Elise, a final-year marketing student, was so nervous she nearly dropped her name badge. She stepped into the elevator just as a tall, well-dressed man entered. His cold gaze seemed to freeze the air around them. That was Jack, the company's CEO and founder, famously known among employees as the most difficult boss on the planet. As Elise lowered her head to unplug her earphones from her phone, one of the earbuds slipped from her hand and fell straight into Jack's suit pocket. She stared, mouth open, as if she'd just witnessed a murder. "Damn it," she groaned internally. Jack frowned when he noticed Elise staring at him. She quickly lowered her gaze, pretending to tap on her phone, hands trembling, her mind racing to figure out how to retrieve the evidence before she got mistaken for some kind of weirdo. For the rest of the morning, Elise couldn't focus on a single task. Only one thought echoed in her mind: I need to get that earbud back. After the lunch break, she took a chance and stepped into Jack's office under the pretense of delivering some documents. She spotted his suit jacket hanging neatly on a hook behind his desk. Taking a deep breath, Elise quietly reached out. "What are you doing?" A deep male voice rang out behind her, nearly making her knees buckle. Jack stood there with arms crossed, eyes full of suspicion. Elise stammered, trying to explain, her face turning bright red like a boiled shrimp. Jack narrowed his eyes, silently crafting all sorts of theories, from tech spy to CEO fangirl. Who was this girl, really? After the earbud incident, Elise thought she'd be fired in the blink of an eye. But strangely, Jack never brought it up again. He was just eerily silent. He only gave her the occasional glance when they passed in the hallway or acted so cold and indifferent that Elise couldn't help but wonder, did I really make that bad of an impression? What she didn't know was that on the other end, Jack was paying far more attention to her than necessary. As a CEO who prioritized confidentiality above all, Jack was extremely sensitive to anything suspicious. And Elise's act of sneaking something out of his pocket had triggered every internal alarm in his head. A new intern, barely social with others, awkward in a suspicious way. She arrived earlier than the receptionist, sat alone scribbling meticulous notes, and constantly stared at her phone like she was secretly messaging someone. One day, Jack happened to see Elise walk into an empty meeting room, glance around as if searching for something, then quietly leave. Jack frowned. What is she doing? Planting a listening device? Instead of confronting her directly, Jack chose to observe. He quietly asked his assistant to check her computer activity, and even had a camera installed near her desk, under the guise of optimizing office layout. But after a week of surveillance, instead of uncovering suspicious behavior, he discovered an incredibly bizarre series of actions. She bought bubble tea for the entire team but pretended it was from someone else. She stuck motivational notes to her screen, riddled with typos like "fighting Elise." And during lunch breaks, she secretly listened to children's songs to stay positive. Jack sat in front of the camera footage, completely torn between laughter and disbelief. Is she the dumbest spy in the world? Meanwhile, Elise was convinced that Jack had obsessive control issues. Every time she emailed him, he replied in curt, emotionless sentences. Once, she submitted a presentation full of bright, creative colors. He simply responded, "Too flashy. Unnecessary. Does he have a color allergy or something?" Elise whispered in despair to a colleague, but even as Elise misunderstood him as the boss from hell, Jack couldn't stop watching her. She puzzled him, a strange mix of clumsy and sincere, unlike anyone he had ever met. And from that moment on, Jack found himself entangled in a mess far bigger than he expected. Ever since Elise broke into his suit pocket and got caught red-handed, a string of bizarre misunderstandings began to unfold, as if the universe was determined to turn her peaceful internship into a full-blown sitcom. Everything began when Elise received an anonymous message through the company's internal chat system. "Don't be too curious about Jack. Some secrets are better left untouched." Her eyes widened, and her heart pounded in her chest. Did the boss send this? Did I stumble upon something serious? She thought, panicking. Meanwhile, Jack, completely unaware of the message, was having a headache over something else, a mysterious gift box. A light blue-wrapped package had appeared on his desk with no sender name. Inside was a brand new pair of earbuds and a scribbled note, returning this to you, even though it was my fault last time. Please don't hold a grudge. Jack frowned as he read the note. Was it her? Trying to make amends? Or is this some new way to get on my good side? Elise, who actually did not send the gift, was still busy trying to find out who had sent the anonymous message. She decided to ask a trusted coworker for help, Danny, a funny IT guy with a knack for tracking things down. But during their chat, she accidentally typed jerk instead of Jack, and fate played its cruel trick. The message was mistakenly sent to the company-wide group chat. The marketing department exploded with gossip within 5 minutes. While Elise wished she could disappear from the face of the earth, Jack happened to read the message during an executive meeting, and laughed. He said nothing, just quietly saved the screenshot as a fun little souvenir of the strangest intern he'd ever met. What surprised him even more was that, despite the embarrassment, Elise didn't hide or panic. She knocked on his office door and apologized sincerely, her face beat red but her voice full of honesty. Jack looked at her in silence, not with his usual coldness, but with a trace of amusement. Her awkward sincerity made him feel something strange. For the first time in years, someone wasn't afraid of his authority. She just wanted to do the right thing. They still misunderstood each other, still made the wrong assumptions. But somewhere within those confusions, amid sharp glances and accidental touches, something was beginning to shift. They were no longer enemies, but not quite friends either. Their relationship was strange, yet oddly magnetic. Then came the year-end marketing project, unexpectedly assigned to Elise's department, a critical campaign for a VIP client, with an impossible deadline and sky-high expectations. At first, Elise thought she'd just help with copy edits or logistics, but reality hit hard. She was appointed as Jack's direct assistant. He would be overseeing the entire campaign. This is it, Elise groaned internally. A combo of grumpy boss plus deadly deadline is going to kill me before graduation. But surprisingly, the first few days working with Jack weren't as terrible as she feared. He was still strict, still blunt. He called her presentation too flashy with zero hesitation, but at the same time, he would sit with her late into the night, patiently explaining every point, a level of commitment Elise never expected from a CEO.as for Jack. Working closely with Elise for the first time in a professional setting, he realized she was nothing like the amateur spy he once imagined. She was proactive, creative, and surprisingly, fearless when it came to debating ideas. She dared to challenge his suggestions when they didn't make sense, and even if her voice trembled, she stood her ground. One evening, both of them stayed at the office until nearly 11 p.m. to finish tweaking the slides for an important meeting the next day. Elise, exhausted, leaned her head on the table and sighed. I thought working in creative meant dreaming and sketching freely. Turns out it's just Excel sheets and deadlines. Jack glanced at her, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. Welcome to adulthood. Elise laughed, and in that moment, Jack suddenly realized, her laughter was incredibly soothing. Since that night, something subtly shifted between them. The meetings were still intense, but no longer icy. The arguments still flared, but they always ended in gentle compromises. Elise began to see beyond his cold exterior. Jack was meticulous, responsible, and deeply committed. He remembered every detail, prioritized quality above all else, and, most notably, quietly shielded her whenever other departments pressured her. Jack, on the other hand, was starting to lose his professional objectivity. He no longer saw Elise as just an intern, but as a colleague. And worse, As someone he was beginning to care about, the project wasn't finished yet, but amidst the pages of strategy documents, budget lines, and presentation slides, something had quietly begun, a fragile, warm connection that was dangerously easy to fall for. Jack was never someone who let others into his private world. But for the past 2 years, he'd had a hidden friend, an anonymous account with a silly yet oddly familiar name, Springbreeze92. They'd met on a forum for marketers and creatives. It started with a few debates, which turned into regular conversations. Springbreeze always knew how to listen, always showed up when Jack needed someone to talk to, no judgment, no pressure. With her, he could laugh and share things even his assistant or sister had never heard, but Jack had never asked for her real identity. He thought it best to keep things within the boundaries of anonymity until one evening, while working with Elise on the concept for a promotional video, Jack happened to glance at her laptop. She had a note open with suggested voiceover lines, and at the bottom, a small signature caught his eye: Springbreeze92. His heart skipped a beat. At first, he thought he'd misread. But the writing style, the phrasing, even the quirky tilted smiley face icon, it all matched. Elise was Springbreeze. The girl who had encouraged him during sleepless nights. The one who'd send peaceful music every weekend. The one who'd been quietly by his side, without him ever realizing. Jack didn't know whether to feel happy or overwhelmed. Because now, his feelings for Elise weren't just based on digital affection or gratitude. He was genuinely drawn to her real self, sometimes clumsy, sometimes stubborn, but always wholehearted and warm. So he began to keep his distance. He avoided looking at her for too long. Avoided smiling when she spoke, and that confused Elise. Why is he acting so distant when we were working so well together? She didn't know that this distance didn't come from dislike, but from fear. Jack feared that if he revealed he knew the truth, everything would change. He feared breaking something beautiful that had unintentionally formed across two worlds, one online, one real. But feelings can't be hidden forever. Jack knew that sooner or later, he would have to face Elise, not as boss Jack or an old online friend, but as a man who was seriously falling for her. Ever since Jack discovered that Elise was Springbreeze, things hadn't been the same. He no longer teased her with light sarcasm during meetings, no longer stayed up late helping her fine-tune slides. He began to pull away, quietly, but noticeably. Elise felt the shift, and it left her troubled. She didn't understand what had changed. They had been growing closer, working in sync. There had been glances that no longer felt indifferent, silences that were no longer cold. Yet suddenly, Jack reverted to a version of himself that felt cold, almost distant. Did I do something wrong? Elise had once gathered all her courage to ask him during a short meeting. Jack shook his head, avoiding her eyes. No. You're doing great. It's just, we should maintain professional boundaries. Just one sentence. But it was enough to make Elise feel like she was being pushed out of the world she thought she was finally entering. She started overthinking everything. Was I just a tool to help him complete the project? Was his concern all an act? She remembered the sleepless nights they worked through together, how he shielded her from interdepartmental pressure, the silent moment he handed her a warm cup of tea. She had thought, maybe there was something more than just work. Elise was hurting. Not because of Jack's coldness, but because of her own uncertainty, for allowing her heart to wander too far into an unnamed relationship. She submitted a request to transfer departments. Why? The department head asked. I want to challenge myself in a new environment. It was a generic, familiar answer, but also completely true. Because in her current department, there was someone who made it impossible for her heart to stay calm enough to work. Jack received the notice late in the afternoon. He sat in silence for hours in his office, eyes fixed on the screen where her name appeared. His chest tightened, a feeling of both emptiness and regret. He knew he was the one who pushed her away. He'd chosen silence, distance, and control, afraid that his feelings would get out of hand. but now, as Elise truly prepared to leave, he realized those feelings had long since spun out of his control. The press conference to launch the Reframe campaign, the company's biggest project of the quarter, was held in the grand ballroom of a five-star hotel. The media turned out in full force, and the leadership team entered with pride on their faces. Elise sat in the second row, wearing a soft-colored business dress, holding a stack of documents in her hands, but her heart felt unbearably heavy. This would be her last event as part of Jack's team on stage. Jack appeared in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He was still the calm, sharp creative director, but his eyes held something unfamiliar. The presentation on the campaign's concept and media strategy went smoothly. But at the end, just when everyone expected the usual thank you note, Jack suddenly paused. He looked straight at Elise, no longer avoiding, no longer guarded. "I'd like to say something," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "It's not part of today's press content. Throughout this project, I've learned more than just professional skills. I've learned how to trust, how to listen, and how to acknowledge the mistakes I've made." The room began to stir. Elise looked up, locking eyes with him, startled. "There was someone I misunderstood," he continued. "I thought she approached me for selfish reasons. I doubted her, kept my distance, and hurt her with my silence and coldness. But the truth is, she's been by my side all along, under the name Springbreeze92. The online friend I respected so much turned out to be the colleague I unfairly judged." The room fell silent, and today, in front of everyone here, I just want to say one thing: I like you. Not because you're Springbreeze. Not because of what you wrote online. But because you, who you are in real life, are warm, resilient, and even delightfully argumentative at times." He smiled. "Elise, I'm sorry for making you feel hurt. But if you'll let me, I'd like a chance to start over, with no screens between us this time." 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Elise didn't say a word. But tears fell silently down her cheeks. She didn't hide them, didn't turn away. Instead, she stood up, walked to the stage, and wrapped her arms around him in front of hundreds of stunned onlookers. The entire ballroom erupted. Jack held her tightly, whispering into her ear, "This time, I won't let you go." 3 months after the press conference that went viral for its surprise confession, Elise officially returned to the company, not as the shy intern from before, but as a full-time marketing employee, and Jack's official girlfriend. The office was still noisy as ever, but the way people looked at her had changed. There was no more gossip or doubt, only recognition and a bit of envy, especially now that Jack, the notoriously aloof boss, had transformed into the picture of a love-struck man. Morning coffee. Jack gently placed a mocha on Elise's desk. "Thanks, but for the third time, you forgot the ice." She raised an eyebrow, half joking. "I didn't forget. I just wanted you to drink it hot." "Like my feelings for you," he winked, making the whole office burst into laughter. Their love story slowly became legend in the company, starting with a ridiculous misunderstanding, followed by silent support, then a public confession. Elise sometimes still wondered, if she hadn't dropped her earphone that day, would they have made it to this point? The answer came one late night, when both stayed behind to polish the final documents for a new quarter project. "Elise," Jack suddenly called, his voice slightly deeper than usual. She looked up, and saw him walking toward her, holding an old white earbud. "I've kept this all along. The earbud you dropped into my coat pocket that first day. I meant to give it back, but every time I saw it, I just couldn't." Elise laughed. "Why not?" "It's just," she froze. At the tip of the earbud was a tiny diamond ring. Jack knelt down, still holding the earbud. "You connected with me that day through a misplaced earphone. Now, I want to use it to connect you to my life. Elise, will you marry me?" Tears welled in her eyes as she laughed and cried at the same time. She nodded, yes. Applause erupted from a few coworkers who had secretly been watching from a distance. A perfect ending for a love story that began with a mistake, unfolded through conflict, and ended with a proposal tied to a fallen earbud.